That this church is different may go without saying, but it will not for the next 5 or 10 minutes. The Israelites of old wanted to be like the nations round about them, and so they insisted that Samuel, give us a king. We want to be like the nations round about us. Today, churches want to be like the denominations round about us. We don't. So how is this church different? 101 ways, but I'll spare you. One is that we're totally undenominational. I have a sermon coming up here in a week or two just on that topic. What do we mean when we say non or undenominational? But for now, I'll just mention it. Totally undenominational. This church has no earthly head, no earthly headquarters, no pope, no president, no council, no archbishop. It's not part of a diocese. It's not part of a regional area, district, or synod of churches. This church is different. It doesn't have any written creed or conference or convention ties that determine our doctrines and our practices. We do not vote. The third largest, and this is not, it is sort of in my notes, but mainly it's just coincidentally in the news, the third largest denomination in the United States just voted about homosexuality and clergy and transgender stuff, or LGBT, they call it, that kind of thing. And they split. They voted to have two now instead of one denomination. We would never be participating in anything like that. Members here are saved by belief and baptism, both, not and or, or either or, but both. Those who have believed and are baptized. When people ask, and recently Don Massenberg was asking about being a member here, and Ron and I talked to him about this subject. Just for 5 or 10 minutes, it was something that needed to be discussed. How's this church different? We meet weekly for the Lord's Supper, no more or less frequent. We observe no holy days. We use no instruments of music, whether that be organ, piano, accordion, or a complete band of instruments. We do not. We don't have any church-sponsored schools or recreation or entertainment or hospitals. I know there's a St. E's here, but we don't have a church religious hospital, We don't have a church daycare, adoption agency, soup kitchen, or, and I'm only semi-joking, a Starbucks franchise. I didn't put that there for no reason. Some churches do. No work is done through human institutions or agencies. The church can do its own business. Thank you very much. But you know what? And I said there's 101, and I just gave you, 10 or 20? Just a few there, but this will scratch the surface, but it's not really what's the difference. So why spend time with it? Because that's what people normally see. Here's the real difference. The real difference is the way, and I've got 4 if you're taking notes. Here's the real difference. We regard Christ as the only head. Amen. And the word only, is it in caps? Yes. And that's the emphasized word, underscored word. Oh, everybody regards Christ as a head. No. That's different. We're different. We regard Jesus Christ as the only head. Matthew 28, all authority, not most, not some, all authority is given to me in heaven and on earth, Jesus says. In Ephesians 1, He's head over most things to the church. What liberal translation are you reading? He's head over all things to the church. It's even reflected in our designation. It's not a proper noun name of this church, but it describes this congregation meeting in this place is of Christ. No, it's not Methodist, it's not Presbyterian, Lutheran, Catholic, First Day or Seventh Day Adventist, or any other of the other popular names that are well known. It's reflected also in our purpose. What are we here for? What's the church's existence to be promoting? It's promoting growth. Growth into the head, or up into the head, Jesus Christ, Ephesians chapter 4:15. It's also reflected in our mission to hold up and sound forth the truth of Christ's gospel to the world. 1 Timothy 3:14 describes it as a building project, that we're the ground and pillar, or pillar and foundation of the truth. And in 1 Thessalonians 1:8, the gospel has sounded forth from the Thessalonian church to those in the world, and likewise we try to do the same. Now this is why. That previous list was what was fruit, what was on the surface, what was seen as a result. But this that I've just spoken to you is the why. Why are we not affiliated with a denomination? Why are we not a part of a conglomeration of congregations under an earthly headquarter, and you can name whatever city you wish as to where it's located? Why we are completely autonomous? Why? Why have we no earthly head or headquarters? This, then, is one of 4 real differences. We claim the New Testament contains all, not some, all Christ's instructions. John 16, Jesus said prior to His death, I've got more to tell you, but you're not able to bear it now. But when the Spirit comes, He will guide you into all the truth. Did He succeed or not? Was it accomplished or not? And everybody knows, well, of course it was. God is not going to make a promise and not follow through and fulfill what He said He was going to do. And so it was done. So much so that Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 says, now even the things that I write, you must acknowledge are the commandments of the Lord. It's not just Paul's opinion. It's not just an idea I have that I'd like to share. This is reflected in our conservative approach to authority and our emphasis on Bible studies and Bible preaching. How many times have I been told by people visiting, man, so much Bible study and Bible preaching and so forth there in a month than I had in 10 years in some other location. Well, we're not doing it to impress you and get compliments. But thank you very much. This is why we pattern ourselves after the first century blueprint. This is why we do not have any written creed, catechism, or the like. This is why we don't participate in conferences and conventions and vote whether we will accept homosexual clergy or not. This is why. And this is then the real difference. We regard Christ as the only head, and we claim the New Testament contains all that we need to know of Christ's instructions. 2 more. We believe we must do all the New Testament. And yes, I know I'm putting in caps to remind me to emphasize it, and so I hope I'm succeeding. We believe we must do most of what the New Testament... No, don't say that. We must do all the New Testament says. All it requires. Matthew 28, Jesus with His own mouth prior to leaving the earth told people to teach people. First of all, He said, go make disciples of them, and then teach them to observe most of the things I told you. That's not how it reads. Observe everything I've commanded you. Matthew 28:19. 1 John 2, later written than when Jesus made the Matthew statement, later says, people, we have got to walk in the truth, abide in the truth, walk as Jesus walked, or we don't have God. And He's talking to Christians when He says that. So this point I'm making now is reflecting our holding up the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help us God. It hopefully is reflected in the preaching of the whole counsel of God, not some or most, but the whole counsel of God, describing all types of topics. This is why we do not recognize people as Christians or accept them as members if they've not obeyed the gospel in its entirety, not partially. That's why. This is also why we do not accept as saved those who've only prayed the sinner's prayer or believed they were saved before they were baptized. This is why we assemble to observe communion of the body and blood of Jesus every Sunday. Why don't you do it more often or less often? As I heard this past week, they said, or I read that they did it the first Sunday of every month. Why don't you guys do that? Why are you different? Why is it every Sunday? Not less, not more. This is why we must believe, or we do believe, we must do all the New Testament requires. This is the real difference, and I'm done. We believe we must do only what the New Testament requires. Sounds similar to the previous one, different though somewhat. In 2 John 9, John says we must not go onward. We must not progress, add to is what we'd probably call it. We must not add to what we've been told by God to do. We must not go outside the doctrine of Christ. Except you abide in the doctrine of Christ, you don't have God. You have to stay inside. 1 Corinthians 4, you must not think beyond that which is written. So this is then reflecting, or will be reflected, in the simplicity of what we do here. A lot of people will attend our services for the first time visiting and comment about how it's sort of real simple, or Little House on the Prairie-ish, or whatever. And I don't say, hey. No, we're not trying to impress people with the elaborate nature, with the complexity of the service, with people are left scratching their head, what was that all about? It's pretty straightforward and simple.
Amen.
This is why we do not do such things as pray to Mary. Why don't you guys pray to Mary? This is why. We don't sprinkle for baptism. We don't dance in our assemblies. We don't accompany our singing with instruments of music and worship. We don't sponsor any kinds of entertainment, recreation, or charitable programs, or businesses like Starbucks for that matter. We do not work through institutions or agencies other than the church to do God's business. We don't practice infant baptism. We don't have a clergy-laity distinction. We don't believe in purgatory. We don't talk about having women be public preachers. We don't gather money in ways other than free will offerings and on any other days other than Sunday. This is the real difference. This is it. I've only got 4. Now you go ahead and make a 5th and show me where you got it, and I'll maybe entertain the idea. But I only came up with 4 real differences. Okay, I'm done. This congregation is different, but not just to be different. I think whoever, was it George and some others started this congregation years ago? I think they started it to be different. No, they didn't, and I wasn't even here. That's not the reason. We're not doing it to be different. We're not saying, look at us, people. We're carving out a niche for us that's different than every other church in the Appleton area. No, we're not. This is a difference, not for difference sake. It's different for good reasons, and I've shared 4 good Bible reasons.
Amen.
And we hope that that has also a reasonable appeal to you too. Thank you for listening.